Hi everyone, welcome to SDA Skills. And this is a weekly system design session. We normally have a deep dive system design session on one of the weeks and then followed by like a mock interview on alternate weeks. So this week we have a mock interview and we have Karthikeya volunteered as an interviewee and Mehul volunteered as a mock interviewer. So the format of this mock interview is like we take about like 45 minutes with buffer of 15 minutes for a mock interview to happen between the two. And then like we collectively discuss the feedback on what can be done better, like why the solution or design is designed like so both helping interviewee and interviewer. So if you would like to be part of this session, you can always ping me. And like if you have another ideas on how we can make this better, that's also welcome. So yeah, so just a note that like the feedback, anything that we provide will help interview and interviewer to get better. So with this, let me give the forum to Mehul and Kartikeya. Kartikeya, would you like to share your screen? And Mehul, please get started with your question.
Thank you, Naga. Thank you very much. So I guess, so let's get started. So in this case, Karthikeya, could you please give your introduction as brief as possible so that we can get started?
Yeah. So I have overall 16.
Kartikeya, could you share your screen, whichever yours? Yeah. Yeah, just type some system design. Yeah, mock interview somewhere as a title or something.
Okay.
Okay, just make it a little big so that like who are joining late. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Get started. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I have overall 16 years of experience, and I'm let's say preparing for system design interviews, and I have upcoming Facebook interview. Yeah. So I've been participating in these forums, and I'm looking forward to this mock interview.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. So in that case, let me get started. So just a second. All right. So let me choose the question accordingly then. Okay. So in this case, we are in the same team. Let's assume that we are being asked to design a newsfeed system. And so like, what is newsfeed? So basically product people actually just came to us saying that, according to any social media help page, right? Newsfeed is something like a constantly, updating the list of like when you go to access the, any social media homepage, you get the list of stories in your homepage, I believe. And the way that it happens is that you have a friends you basically follows, right? So in this discussion, let's start that you have a friends that you are following, and this news feeds includes like a bunch of updates, right? They update the photos or some sort of like a activity that they perform, and then and also the likes from the people, pages, or some kind of like a person you follow, right? So this is pretty much like how the interview, basically in this case, the requirement actually has came to us. Now, so yeah, I mean, let's get started. I mean, you can ask me a question if you want, like from the functional design point of view, functional requirement point of view. I mean, and then we can start from there.
Cool. So just to be clear, I mean, to get a perspective of what this is like. So this is something like a Facebook news feed, in the sense that I have friends who I can follow, and based on that activity, when I log in, then I see a list of items. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So from the just want to point out one thing is that from the scale point of view here, whatever we are designing, the scale is something that we should keep in the mind, because we have a constantly growing, the scale, the number of people who are joining this app. So we gotta whenever we design, we gotta make sure that we have a high traffic volume as well. So in this case, let's assume, I'm just throwing out this number as we were given this number. So let's say the traffic the traffic volume. Let's see. So traffic volume for let's say, in this case, Facebook, then we can assume that it's probably 10 million daily active users that we have. Just to keep that numbers in the mind. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. So you will design the system with 10 million daily active users. Is that correct?
That's right. That's a good number to start with. Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah. So so usually in a system there are many more users than active users. So I would assume that maybe we have 100 million or total users, right? So 10% of the users are daily active users. Okay. Yeah, we straight away jumped to non-functional, but before coming to functional requirements, so what should the system have? So user can follow friends, user can make a post. The post can be text or image. Is that right?
That's good to start with. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, and when a user makes a post, that should get updated to their friends' news feed. All right. Is there anything else from a functional requirement that is important for the system?
So one thing that which we are not being told, but let's assume that product people might come back tomorrow saying that to keep the thing simple, let's assume that the feed that we're gonna see, right, is sorted by some sort of like a reverse chronological order in which the event happen. So let's make sure that we also consider that when we design it.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are, I think, good. These are actually good sort of requirement to start with, I believe.
Okay. And so is this a hard requirement, or is this some sort of approximation, right? So it's like most recent feeds first, but if a feed which is 1 or 2 seconds later, I think this is not a hard requirement. This is a generic requirement, correct?
There's generic. Yeah, you can start with that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Then all right. So in terms of non-functional requirements, some sort of considerations, I would say that this system needs to be highly available, and even wait.
Hey, Ankur, are you trying to draw something? Sorry to interrupt, Karthikeya.
Yeah.
No, I think it's from someone else, actually, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking that guy.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, please ignore that and you can erase.
Or maybe the person. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Shall I stop the sharing for a moment, or I just maybe need to edit the settings of the board so that no one else can change it?
Yeah, sure.
Hey, are you sharing your screen, Karthikeya?
Give me 1 moment, please.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Can you share see the screen now?
Yeah,
Yes.
I can see it.
Okay. Sorry. All right. So the system will be eventually consistent in the sense that so if one of the friends makes a post, it is not necessary that the next time I load my feed, that the post will have to appear, right? So it can appear with a few seconds of delay. So we will ensure that the feed loads fast, but new updates might come after some time. Um, yeah, so this is there, and it must be uh, yeah, should you say fault tolerant, right? So the system should be always available. So that means if some part of the system is down, I should still get my news feed. And yeah, so in terms of non-functional requirements, let's just try to get an estimation of the reads per second and writes per second. So how many requests this system will receive. So we have 10 million daily active users. So how many times would a person load their feed in a day? So let's say 10 times, right? So maybe that's enough in terms of loading a feed in a day. Is that agreeable for you?
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair. That should work.
Okay, so this means that we have
I think one thing I just want to make a correction, Kartikeya, is that I know that we said high traffic volume is 10 million daily active user, but I'm just thinking about that for the Facebook use case. I mean, it's definitely not 10 million. It's probably like in a range of 100 millions actually, given that there are large number of people who are accessing the Facebook. So just keep that the requirement may change. So just for that one, so keep the minimum to be 100 million. Then we are good.
okay. So then let's go with that because we haven't done much yet.
Yep.
So then we keep 1 billion total users. So 10 times a day, user loads a feed. So we have so 1 billion requests in a day, right? Um, so so how many requests per second? So basically, what we need is we need to, let's say, I'm just going with 100,000 seconds in a day at an approximation.
Mhm.
So I would have 1 million, and then I think that comes out to be 10K requests per second approximately. So this is the requests per second we have for feed load. Now, another thing our system needs is feed post. So usually people post a feed or rather, yeah, much less frequently than they load a feed. So maybe a user does, I don't know, 2 posts in a day. Uh, so so then we have 5 times less. So we have 2K writes per second. So this is the estimation of our reads and writes per second. So I mean, just one thing we can see here is that there is a good amount of difference in the reads and the writes per second. I mean, I'm being quite generous with the writes. It's probably even less, but let's just go with this.
Yep, that's fair.
Then yeah, then um, and the other thing is storage requirement. So yeah, so we said that feeds can be text or images, right? So if we are writing text, so taking inspiration from Twitter, let's say it's 150 words, and on an average, a word is 6 characters. So This is 900 chars is equal to 900, let's say bytes, or 1K bytes for text, just to keep calculation simple. And image is 1 MB, right? Now, so so how many posts did we have in a day? So we had 2 posts in a day. So we need to sort of identify how many of these are text and how many of these are images. So I would say let's just take half because these days it's quite easy to post an image. So so we have one text post per user per day and one image post, right? And then this makes our calculations easy. So right. So how many users did we had? We had 100 million daily active users and who are making one text post. So we have 1K bytes per day. So this gives us 100 million. This is 100 into 2 to the power 20 into. So yeah, so this is basically 100 billion bytes or 100 GB in a day, which is so if you want to store the data for 3 years, yeah, so just this would mean 100 TB for 3 years, approximately, right? And similarly, so image is we said it's 1 MB, the size of an image. So it is just and the text was 1 KB. So this is 100 petabytes for 3 years, right? So this is approximately the storage requirements that we need. I mean, of course, the image will take up the most amount of space. But yeah, this is how much storage we would need to cater for. Good.
Sounds good.
That's yeah. Now let's go for APIs. So what are the APIs our system would need? So as a user, I need to make a post. So this would be a post API. It's interesting that so let's just say post item, right? So this is one API. Then I have load feed, and I have let's say make friend. So post item. So what are the character? So this will have user ID. Then it will have text slash image, and yeah, I think these are the main things for posting an item. So load feed, yeah, this is interesting. So this will be basically a JSON of posts. So I will get yeah, I mean I can I mean I don't want to spend a lot of time writing the JSON, but I will have a list of posts um, in this load feed. This will be a get. And make friend is then this will be again a put. This will have user ID, which is the owner, and then user ID friend. I think, I mean, you will probably have on the other side like a friend accept and so on, you know, those kind of validations, but this is the more important APIs that we have. Okay. So the next thing I want to go to is how will we store the data of the system, or what is the data our system needs to store? So our system needs to store posts, or before that, our system needs to store users, right? So so the users have you know, some characteristics like, I don't know, name, age, or rather name, date of birth, location, etc. And so this, yeah, this I would. Now, the main thing we need to decide is whether we should store this in SQL database, relational database, or NoSQL. So, yeah, I would go with the NoSQL on this, because I mean, being the nature of the system, we may want to add more and more aspects to the information that we want to store for the user. So this is like a schema that is changing quite a lot, and I don't see that we have a lot of relationships on the attributes of user, right? So I would go with NoSQL document driven, document based store for the user, and we can keep adding more info attributes for the user as the system evolves. And so this is for storing the user. The other thing we need to store is the relationship, because our whole system is based on the relationships that users have with their friends. And a good recommendation for this is some kind of graph-based system, because then it's easy to find the friends that you're following, or find the friends of friends. So this is essentially to store the information, the relationship between two users. So who are the friends of a particular user? And then right, so this is, let's say, the durable data that needs to be, of course, we have to store posts. So post will have the user ID, and then text and image reference. So why I say image reference is because images will be stored separately. So in an image store, and the image reference is basically the URL of the image which has been stored in an image store. So, and because this is a global system, right? So the images could be served by a CDN, but they will be stored in a separate store. So we'll come to how images are served in a bit. So the posts would, yeah. So I mean, to avoid complications, so this would also be a no SQL database. Yeah, I mean, the only thing you have to take care of is the reference of the user that has made the post. So we need to ensure that we are able to search for posts based on user ID. All right. So I wanted to start drawing up the major parts of the system. And before I draw, I want to just write it. So basically what we need is we need feed service that will serve feeds to the user. Now, this, I mean, one thing I should have clarified at the start is that the user can probably access this from web browser, from mobile, various devices. But the feed service will take care of serving it to various devices. And then we need, we need a post service which can accept posts that people make. Yeah.
Mhm.
And we need, let's say, I don't know, a relationship service where people can make relationships, so make friend someone or unfriend someone, or various kind of things. And
Yeah, I think for the relationship service, I think we can keep that as a separate, separate, the module itself, or that way, because I think one of the goal in this design is to design the feed service system, right?
Okay. Okay, great.
So, yep.
Okay, great. So thank you. So let's start with designing something. So let's say we do have a feed service. Now, what needs to happen is the thing that I'm already thinking about is that the feed service needs to be able to generate feeds before. So we cannot generate feeds on runtime, right? So that is, I think, clear. So what needs to happen is as the client is making a post, the we need to be able to, how should I say, in a materialized view, generate the feed for a user. So let's look at it this way. So we have here materialized view. So this is usually a cache, because one of the intentions of our system was that the users should be able to get their news feed quite quickly, right? So I mean, on the get side, the system will work like this. So so there is a client who sends the request to the feed service, and the feed service loads the news feed for this particular user from the materialized view cache and serves it back. Now, the whole trick of this system is how do we generate the materialized view cache for each user, right? So so let's say the client is also making posts, right? So the client makes a post to the post service, and what the post service would do is um, store this information in the post um, uh, database, right? So we talked about the posts database. So which user made this post, and what was the post about, and so on. So let's take the example of the text first, yeah, and then we'll come to images. So the post database is stores the post, and now what needs to happen is someone, let's say, let's, for want of a better name, just call it workers, needs to also it needs to consume an event from the post service, saying that a particular user has made a post. So This will be this will be via. I mean, this could be a queue or it could be a stream. Let's just for the simplicity take it as a queue. So let me put a queue here. This is let's say a post queue. So it is consuming posts from the post service, and the worker is consuming the information here. And then for each post, it's finding out who are the who are the friends of the user that has made the post, and then it updates the cache of that user, and if there is so we'll come to what is stored in the cache, because right, the cache cannot and should not become too big. So if there is no materialized view for that cache, it would create the cache for that user. So the worker so the worker also connects to the post database and to check for the posts that have been made by the friends of a particular user. So,
but I thought, sorry, one more thing that is not clear to me is that I thought we're going to keep all the data of the relationship in the graph DB, is what you just mentioned right earlier.
Yes,
so,
you're right.
So do you think that, yeah, please.
Yes, so yeah, so the thing is, I'm considering changing the design a bit, because now what is happening is that there seems to be too many databases. So I have one database for users, another for relationships, and another for posts, and it is making the system too complex. So
so like in this case, let's to make the life simpler, right? So usually you can, so in this case, you can assume that that we have a graph DB, and pretty much that graph DB sort of like a consist of all the relationship between the friends, and we sort of like have this data to be cached already. So let's assume that we have already that cache that you can pull from the worker, which will give you the relationship basically. So let's assume that you already have it, right?
Okay.
If that helps.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that will definitely help. So let's say you have the relationship cache, right? I have in a cache all the friends for a particular user, and I can get those the posts of those users, sort them, and update them in the materialized view cache. So yeah, so this is how it will work at a high level. So so then why do we have the post queue, you might ask? I think the yeah. So the post queue, let's say a user already has their newsfeed updated here. Let's say the daily active users have their feeds updated in the cache here. So as soon as one user makes a post, we are going to, why this queue will help is that that message comes in this queue, and then the worker will consume that message and update the materialized view for all the friends of that user. And I can know the friends quickly by checking the relationship cache.
I see.
Right.
Yeah, but then, but do you see the problem with that approach where, let's say if there is, the classic problem of, the celebrity that you are following, for example, if that person has, let's say 4 million followers, for example, right? That person you're following, and if that person sort of like posts something to the post service, so how will we handle, that kind of fan out problem, basically? So what's your thought process there?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a very good question. So I would have, let's say, two workers. So one is a normal worker, for people like me and you. Sorry, I don't know if you're a celebrity, but let's
I'm
say,
not a celebrity.
okay. So for normal people, and then there is a different kind of worker for um, celebrities. Now,
Mhm.
so we can define this in our system. Let's say, I know if a user has less than, I don't know, 1,000 followers, then the normal worker gets invoked, and if the user has more than 1,000 or something like that, then we have some threshold for that. So then they are a celebrity. Now, how should the celebrity processing be different? Um, so what do we want for a celebrity, right? So when a celebrity makes a post, we many users are interested in seeing that. And what we should try and do is, um, let's say, we should try and update the newsfeed of as many users as possible, but maybe we can limit this to a number which is manageable for our system. So in a way, it would be roughly the same, but it would have a condition based on, let's say, the most active users. So let's say there are some users who are actively logging into the system. So the celebrity worker will get only the most 1,000 active followers of that celebrity and update the materialized view for those. And for the others, yeah, sorry, you're not so active, so your feed does not get updated immediately. It would be updated, let's say, a bit later, or it won't be updated at all. It will only be updated on demand. So, I mean, that's the other scenario that we did not come to. What happens if a client asks the feed service and we have nothing in the cache, right? So we need someone who is going to somehow populate your feed, and it will take a bit more um, time. So in that case, the feed service itself would need to, what should we say, look at the post database and also the relationship database to compute the feed for this user and put it in the cache and evict the least recently used feed.
Do you
Uh,
think that that approach has some like a user experience problem where now for those users, which in this case you say the inactive users, right? So those
mhm.
users now will require to, if the request comes in, that requires a lot of processing to happen in the background, particularly.
Yeah.
So in this case, as you saw, right, the worker actually also does the magic of, finding the relationship and things like that, right? So do you see the problem if you have these for inactive users, it will read directly from the post database? Or do you think that we should change this architecture a little bit so that that experience is also important here, the user experience?
Yeah. So I think the key to this question is what could be the size of the cache, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
and whether we can actually store the data for almost all the users. So even if
Exactly.
the user is not using it daily, so let's say someone has not used it for more than a year, then you can probably um, allow the system for that user to be not very available. But if we talk about the daily active users, so let's say we store the top 10 posts um, in the cache, um, or top 20, right? So assuming people don't browse for more than 20 posts. So we need to do some calculations here. So, right. So
I mean, like other approach,
Yeah.
I mean, other thing that I was thinking about in this case is that my fear is that if tomorrow, let's say if the cache is like a point of failure in this case, where, if something goes wrong in a cache, then we are completely screwed. Our service is down and we will be impacting our revenue here. So I'm sure the product people may not like that kind of like approach here. So what can we do here so that that also increases the, like in this case, in this case, it will decrease the processing time if something goes wrong from the fault tolerance point of view. And at the same time, as you know, that worker is actually doing a lot of work here, like which processing the post database and the relationship graph database in this case. So I was wondering if like, how about like we rather store that processing to be into some sort of like some database? What's your thought on that?
Right. So storing the newsfeed for a user in a database, I think we would sacrifice some availability for that, or let's say the latency for that. So not availability, the latency. So the latency for a user would be lower in case the feed service has to fetch the materialized view from a database instead of a cache. Now, so I mean, for the sake of time, if I would let's say we figure out the size of the cache for storing all of our data. Now, also assuming that this is a global system, right? So for one, let's say data center, I don't know, in the US or in the Europe or wherever, if we see that we need, I don't know, 100 instances of the cache based on the amount of data we need to store in the cache. So we can also partition the cache. So this allows us to store quite a lot of data in the cache. And for fault tolerance, we can also use replication. So many of these things are provided out of the box by cache solutions. So I would go for that right now, so that I provide less latency for the user, even if they don't see a new feed from one of their friends, and that is acceptable to us. And eventually they will see the new feeds as the worker catches up with the, let's say, the lags that is happening. So I think the temptation to store this in the database is there for durability of the newsfeed, but considering that the newsfeed keeps getting updated frequently, I would prefer this to be in a cache, and because it's derived data, we can recalculate it if the cache goes down. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. So I think this is good. Why don't we, I think we have some like 10 minutes. I think I'm not sure about the timeline, but I'm just keeping track of it. So I think we have 10 more minutes, let's say.
Okay.
Why don't we talk about the scale here? Because I mean, obviously the current architecture that we have, like in terms of like a scale, like how do we want to think about the scaling based on the traffic?
Right. So let's talk about the scale. So the most important thing is the post database, and so we over here we said we have 100 terabytes for 3 years is the total storage that we want in our system. So this we cannot store all of this on one database. Normally we have approximately 4 terabytes on one system, so we need 25 different partitions or something like that, right? Maybe we keep a few more for scalability's sake. So the thing is, we need to partition the post database, and a very important thing is how we will partition the post database. The intuitive thing would be to partition it by user. That has the danger that, again, you talked about the celebrities. So or there are some users which do more posts. So this can result in a queue if we partition it by my user. So just to keep an even distribution, I would just partition it by the post ID. Yeah, so this allows us an equal mm, allocation for each shard for the post database. And the other thing is the images, right? So we forgot about the images. So um, what we need for serving images, or in the future, if we also have videos, we need mm, or we should make use of a content delivery network, so that what we return in the feed service is essentially just a URL for the content, right? So the feed contains an image URL or later a video URL, and the client would find a CDN instance that is close to it geographically and load the content from there. And the CDNs implement a good amount of caching and so on. So when we do a post, the post service has to ensure that the information goes through to the CDN, so the media, the images and the videos. Right. So if we look back at the non-functional requirements, so by using, we wanted it to be highly available, and by using a cache, we are highly available. We said we can be eventually consistent, and that is what the system is, because it relies on a queue. And for fault tolerance, we need, let's say, more or less this entire all of the components here to be replicated. So I said that the cache has to be partitioned and replicated, and similarly the database has to be partitioned and replicated. So in case one of the replica goes down, we switch to the other one. We can even replicate across the globe. So if one whole data center in one region goes down, we can go to the other region with a higher latency, but at least the system is still available.
Okay.
Right. So I think those are the main things in terms of scalability that I would add.
Okay. So in terms of like a replication aspect that you mentioned, right? So I guess the reason why we want to replicate is because to have, as you say, right, so to having a high availability in this case, where if one of the node goes down, the data must be always be available. So you're thinking that we can replicate all the data to, let's say, we have n servers. We can replicate that across all n servers, where the n being a configurable parameter, I assume. Then we can asynchronously replicate all the data to all servers.
Yes. So in this case, yes, asynchronous replication works well here because we said that system will be eventually consistent. So, sorry.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the replication will be asynchronous, so that the post, when we make a post, we don't have to wait for the post to be replicated to all the replicas.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So I mean, so we talked about the non-functional. So if we look at the functional requirements, follow friends. I mean, we didn't talk about that, but you said that it's sort of already there. I would add a service for friend making, following, and so on, which would update the relationship cache. User can make a post. So for that, it's the post service. If it's an image, it goes into the CDN also. And feed should be sorted by reverse chronological order, right? So okay, so that's an interesting concept. So logic would be there in the worker, right? So when it's updating the materialized view for a particular feed, it will put the feeds which are recent at the top. And of course, we want to have a limit. Let's say we have the 20 post limit on a feed. You would remove the lowest feed. So this can be kind of like a linked list. In terms of the feed for a user, linked list of posts, and we just add on the head and remove one from the tail. This ensures that the new feeds keep going at the top. I think that would take care of the functional requirement.
So we can use another 3 more minutes to wrap up. Mehul and Karthikeya.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Karthikeya, please. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so at this point, I would not add anything more to the system. So, I haven't shown a replication in the diagram, but yeah, as I mentioned, we will have partitions for the post database and also replication, and similarly also for the cache. But yeah, I think I have nothing more major to add. If you have any more questions, maybe.
No, I think I know that the time is always constrained, and depending on in which direction we want to, pivot this entire conversation. So I think from that point of view, I think, I don't have any specific question at this point, but I think overall, I think we can discuss about that in the feedback session. But I think this pretty much covers, based on the requirement that was given to you from the non-functional and functional requirement. I think that's so far covers everything actually.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Naga?
Thank you, Karthikeya, and thank you, Mehul. This was a good mock interview. So actually, Mehul, I'd like you to provide feedback, but like little later. But let's open it up to the audience to see any feedback they like to share. You can probably give your feedback also
Sure,
little
mine
later.
too.
Yeah, and I also will give my feedback as well little later. So anyone would like to start discussing the feedback? Please feel free to come and speak. Ankur, you're about to say RK?
Yeah,
I have a
yeah. So one question about the celebrity part. So did we talk about celebrity users there? It seemed like there was a confusion about like whether their posts, they have a lot of followers, so the fan out in that sense will be big, but then their posts maybe just 1 or 2, right? Like posts coming from their end. So just a distinction, just something to observe. That's all.
So Karthikeya, you might want to explain about that, or I can explain the actual what I thought that what you answered it actually. So I think I can start. So basically, what I understand from the fan out service is that it's like, as you mentioned, right, that it's pretty classic, the classic, what do you call the hotkey problem, right? Where it's pretty much that you have to, like if celebrity actually, provides any like a post, for example, then it's the backend system, in this case, a fan out service, for example, that we say, that actually has to process all the, all the relationship, first of all, and at the same time, this newsfeed has to pre-compute all the, the relationship and all the, processing in the during the right time. So obviously, as you mentioned, as you said, right? There's a pros and cons with this approach, right? That Karthikeya actually has mentioned. So what I understood from Karthikeya's discussion is that what he proposed is that he sort of like, I think I like that approach. He said that we cannot solve, there is a trade-off between whether we do the fan out on write or fan out on read operation. But he did mention that we have inactive users in the system that they hardly ever log in, right? So we don't need to sort of like process their cache right away. But what we can do is we can actually have sort of like a hybrid approach where for those users who have many friends, and fetching all the friends list and everything, we can actually process that. But for other users, those are inactive, we can actually don't need to update the cache for those users. And that you can actually do that if that user actually logs in, it can read upon, based on that, the key that is available. One thing that I saw with that problem with that approach is that, I mean, it's simple. One suggestion here is that the worker here sorry?
Mehul, are you continuing your feedback along the way, or like, are you just explaining to Ark's point?
No, I think I can wait now. That's fine.
Okay.
That was one feedback. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Ankur, you were about to say something.
Yeah. So Karthikeya, you mentioned about designing reverse chronological order by having some kind of linked list which is sorted. So let's suppose you have some inactive users and you don't have cache for them, and eventually you load the post for them from the DB itself. So how do you handle the chronological order in that case? Because you have post ID, right? So can you improve the loading over there? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, good question. Right. So I think unless I'm wrong, if we if we load from the this is I think assuming a post has a timestamp, so I think so when the feed service goes to the post, this arrow here, for the inactive users, let's say a user really logs in after a time and their feed is not there in the cache. Now the feed service has to compute it. So the reverse chronological order would be the lesser of the concerns, I would say. I think the bigger concern is what 20 odd feeds we should show to this user. But once we have the 20 feeds, then sorting them by reverse would not be a big job for the code inside feed service, because we won't fetch lots and lots of feeds. We will fetch 20, 40, maximum 100 feeds that we want to show. So we can sort them and then store in the materialized view.
Yeah, I mean, but don't you think this will have a problem? Because let's suppose you have some user which has some friends who have like thousands of posts, right? So how do you know which 20 to fetch unless you do a full lookup for those 1,000, right?
Yeah.
Let's suppose I'm just talking about 1,000. Maybe it could be like 100,000 posts, and you have to select the latest 20 posts out of them.
Yeah.
So
that's a good question, right? And I think when you say this, it makes me think if a NoSQL is actually the best choice for posts, because let's say if we would, basically what we would need to do here is when we are fetching the posts, we need to use the sorting operation from the database itself. So we get only recent posts. Or I don't know, order by, so we don't get all the posts, but we only get the most recent, and the rest we don't even fetch from the database. So, but for this, we need some sorting operations to be provided by the database itself. And I think that would not be so easy in a NoSQL. But yeah, if you have suggestions, then I'm happy to hear that.
No, I just wanted to.
Yeah,
one thing.
Thanks, Ankur. That's a good point. Like Karthikeya, I have some suggestion on this point. Like I can say when I'm giving my feedback. Mehul, you're trying to say something?
Yeah, I was actually sort of like going towards a similar understanding. The feedbacks that I had, that I was like, I was thinking about solving that kind of problem basically would require us to have a worker. So in this case, the worker is actually directly writing into the cache. But I was thinking is that wouldn't that be a good idea to have the worker to write the this processing, because processing itself is very compute intensive in this case. So obviously that will take some time to process. So how about we write that result of compute into a sort of like a NoSQL database, and at the same time worker to also update the cache basically. So it's kind of like two arrows coming to, one arrow goes to cache and then one arrow sort of like processing and writing to result in a NoSQL database. So that actually sort of like I was going towards basically that to get to solve this problem particularly.
Yeah,
The
I
scale
mean,
is pretty huge here.
Yeah, just to clarify, Karthikeya, like NoSQL not sorting is not like the fact. NoSQL can sort. You have the partition and sort key. You can use the sort key as a timestamp, and that will automatically get you the last, I mean, like recent post. Always, like they can fetch pretty quickly, because if you make it the timestamp always part of your overall partition and sort key as a composite key, you can always fetch them much faster in NoSQL.
Okay.
And yeah. Any other feedback from others?
Hi, Naga. Hi, everybody. I'd like to give my feedback. I took some notes here. First one was an excellent approach, very methodical, and covering all major aspects. So requirements, back of the envelope, APIs, database, high-level scalability. I mean, you covered everything. That said, I think you failed in managing your time, the available time. So the first observation I want to make is you could have asked since the beginning what was the main goal of the interview in attempting to get some glimpse about what artifacts or steps that are really important from the point of view of the interviewer, because doing that, it might help you gain some minutes and focus on what's really important. So I'm going to give you a few examples here. You spent 8 minutes on back of the envelope calculations, and that's too much, okay? Even though it makes sense to do these calculations in order to determine the scale of the system, you need to get much faster doing this. And a positive example is you spent 2 minutes on APIs, which in my opinion is great, because APIs, if you know what you're talking about, they are the easy part of an interview. You took 13 minutes on high-level design until you were able to reach the main or hidden problem of designing a news feed, which is the celebrity problem. And in my opinion, you should get to this problem way earlier, because that is where, you know, all the important thing about newsfeed happens. So, and in my opinion, your solution for this problem was not quite good. You probably want to revisit this celebrity problem once again and study it a little bit more. And finally, what probably is the second most important or third most important aspect here, you took 43 minutes to reach the scalability part of the interview. You definitely want to get to that point much earlier, because again, that's when you can exhibit your full thought, your knowledge. So that is my opinion. You somehow need to improve the time you spend on each aspect. Eventually, skipping some of the aspects that you might need to cover, skipping API or skipping database, or skipping back of the envelope, just for the sake of getting to the most important parts of the interview. But overall, I think you are doing really good, and that's pretty much all.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. That very great and detailed feedback.
Thank you, Alex.
And anyone else from the audience like to give their feedback?
So it's not about the feedback, it's just a question to Karthikeya. During his design, he mentioned that while he was handling the celebrity case, if I heard correctly, so he mentioned that he will update for most active around 1,000 user who is following this celebrity.
Correct.
So I would like to know more about that. I mean, how are you thinking that, and how complicated that will be, and how costly that will be to maintaining that information?
Yeah, so I think the approach here would probably not be so complicated. I would say it's just that I mean, if this is okay with the product, then it's probably results in an easier design. But if let's say the business says, or the product owner says, no, I want all users or followers of the celebrities to immediately have their cache sorry, their feed updated, then the problem cannot be solved with the solution. But given the solution, if we say that, okay, what are the things I need to do here? I need to find the 1,000 most active users or something like that for a celebrity. So this in itself is not a very costly operation, because I can use the relationship database and the last active time for a user. So this operation in itself is not very complicated. The complication comes if we have to actually do it for, I don't know, millions of followers. Then this design itself won't work. Then we have to think of something else.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Praveen. Anyone else? Mehul, would you like to provide your feedback? And then...
Hi. So sorry, I was muted actually. So one thing that I could say that is what Alex actually had pointed out earlier is that I think every interview is different, and it all depends on what is expectation from the interviewer at the end. And each interviewer is actually has a different thoughts in their mind when we go for an interview, right? So I think one thing that I could say here is having a clarification, right? Because here, this is pretty broad topic, right? I mean, as you can see, it can cover the breadth of different area, or it can go as deeper as problem, as much you want. So one thing that I think I would wish in that case is Karthikeya should do in general is that, clarify the requirement, like which particular thing that we want to focus on, right? Like in this case, like my expectation, according to what I thought would happen is that, I do wanted to go to the deeper, but at the same time, I really wanted to get into the scalability aspect of it. So obviously, in that case, if we have clarified those kind of requirement initially, then we could have definitely gone into the different direction. So whole discussion could have been different direction. But at the same time, I really wanted to get the big picture of what you think about solving the problem at scale, right? So I think overall, I think from my point of view, those are the two inputs that I have. From the estimation point of view, I think I felt that similar thing is that estimation is sometimes it's a little trickier because whenever we solve the problem, you always start the problem solving that as if we are solving the problem locally. Let's say you are solving this problem as if, on solving this problem on one server. And then eventually we will say that, let's now we have more users. Let's think about solving the problem at scale. And that is what I wanted to pivot the entire discussion to. Let's say later 15 minutes of session, I wanted to go towards that session. But at least, so that's the only two feedback that I have is that, so start with the clarifying questions, ask more questions as much as possible because it's a pretty broad topic and no one can be finishing the entire designing in 45 minutes interview itself. But overall, I think you did good. At least you have a good thought process that I really like it. I mean, you are very, very methodical, like in which step you go and explain each and every detail of it. But you can speed up a few things basically based on the asking the question at initially basically, and then I think you should be good.
Okay. Yeah, that's so. What you're suggesting is that I very methodically or maybe even slowly went through all the things, but maybe the interviewer is not interested in all the details of all the aspects, and they want to jump quickly to the area that they want to focus on.
Right. So I think I do not have any problem with your ability here because you have a very clear understanding of things, but I think it's all how you start asking a question and then the interview context might actually get changed based on that. So I think that's it. I mean, sometimes, like this is how I think, but Sarah, some interviewers are completely different where they think, you ask questions and you answer it everything. So in that case, it's very difficult for you even to which direction to go. So I think at that point, it will become better to ask questions because that's the reality where product people, when we work in real world, that's the reality basically, right? So that's my 2 cents. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Mehul. RK, you're trying to say something?
Yeah, I just want to ask general feedback about back of the envelope calculations, right? In general, do you know whether companies give importance to looking into that? Because looks like when we do that, if you want to do that, then obviously you will end up taking 5-8 minutes like this. Or if you skip that and say it very briefly and move on to the system high level and then get to scalability, would that be preferable, or any thoughts overall? This is for everyone.
Yeah, I think, my take is it depends on the interviewer. It's always good to ask interviewer whether you like detailed estimation or can I make some ballpark estimations here. So if you take based on the users and at least the high level, instead of showing the actual calculations, you can just say I'll going to ballpark this. If you want to know how I'm approaching and if you think this is important, I'll make it detailed. So I mean, maybe that's kind of could reduce another 3-4 minutes there.
Sure.
So on this, I think RK raised a very good point. So if you just asking here, if there was, let's say, one thing you would say I don't need to do in the back of envelope calculations based on what I have done here, then what would you say I could have skipped from what I did? Or would you rather have a recommendation that this much is what is required, I should just become faster at?
No, I think it's kind of, I think the more you practice, I think the faster you get at it. Maybe I think the parts that you covered is fine, but maybe I check with interviewer to see if you want to expand or if you want to estimate all aspects of it, or you can just I mean, a question and clarification would have been better. If he really was looking, then I think I think there's a lot, definitely a value add in what you did, but whether interviewer was looking to evaluate you in that estimation aspect is I mean, we don't know that, right? So that's something.
Yeah, fair enough.
Do companies have a bullet point? Anybody knows that for different sections of a system design?
Yeah, I think each company has their own evaluation procedure, and they have tick marks, like depending on whether you're a senior engineer or like a SD2, 3, 4. I mean, like depending on your number of years of experience, like, and they have different points of evaluation. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know that for any company, for example, that this company, these are the 3 things that they look for in a system design?
I think nobody will share that like outright.
I
I
see.
don't know, like there are some, I mean, like it's again, like there are a lot of paid courses, but like I think the people who are interviewing, they share their own opinions. Again, if I go for interview, my perspective and my points of evaluation need not always align with the organization point, right? So like sometimes I can take some deviations from what is recommended if I think candidate is good, or like vice versa. So sometimes I may be more strict. It all depends on the interview.
Yeah, I think I agree with Naga what you just said, because I think it also depends on what person's experience is, like the interviewee in this case. So as you said, like Karthikeya has many years of experience. So if he's going for those kind of a role that that requires more experience, then obviously this back of envelope calculation does actually important, because he's the person who is designing based on all the estimation and capacity planning. So, but then I think the only caveat here is that how much time do you spend and what is the interview is asking for. So that's exactly where the discussion starts. Is like we can say that. I mean, even I'm also learning this interview process, by the way. So like in that case, I could ask interviewer is that, okay, in which area do you want me to focus on, right? Like do you want me to start with as a single design that I'm designing this entire system as a local machine, or do you want me to start building the system at scale? So those kind of conversation actually give us some kind of hint in which what the interview is expecting. That's just my 2 cents though, but I could be totally wrong here, but that is what I've seen basically.
So for estimation, what I think is the goal of your estimation is to decide what direction you want to go, right? For example, whether a system is a read heavy or write heavy. But if you take a look at what Karthikeya has done the estimation here, he has calculated one image per post has 100 petabytes for 3 years. It's not useful at all, right? I mean, as part of the feed system, it's not used. Like you can make a use of it if you are designing a storage system for the photos, right? I mean, so whatever we have calculated, it's a quick thing, but still, I think it's not going to be useful. But instead of that, if he has calculated, okay, if we have 100 million users, and if we want to store the pre-computed feeds, how much is gonna cost? Like, is that gonna be a read heavy or write heavy? How many reads are coming? How many writes are coming? I think if the calculations would have been that side, then it makes a little bit sense. Otherwise, just calculating for the sake of data and all would be a waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, like that.
I'm kind of
Thanks, Drupad. Sorry, Praveen, are you trying to say something?
Yeah, I'm kind of agree with Karthikeya that, and that's why I wanted to say that when you're asking Karthikeya. So the most important part for the back of the envelope is that the identifying the QPS, and that will give you an idea about whether it's a read heavy system or write. If it's a read heavy, you will focus on the cache. If it's a write heavy, you will focus on the sharding and replica. So that will actually change your design.
I think one more important calculation that we actually missed was the materialized view cache storage calculation, because that's the part which is actually very important, since you have like 100 million users, right? And storing every user feed in a cache would take a lot of storage. So if we had estimated the some kind of value for that, then we would have noticed that it might have needed a database underlying, because the cache is not enough to store.
I think that was not clear from Karthikeya design what he's going to keep in the cache, whether the full feed or just the feed ID. If it's just the feed ID, it will not take much space. But if it's a full feed, yes, he will have to limit that.
I assume it's a full feed, I think. I mean, like
Yeah,
whatever
exactly, yeah.
that UI needs to see. Yeah, Karthikeya can answer. But like adding on to this, like maybe just on the estimation part, Karthikeya. So leaving all this, like since in your high level design, like the material cache is the important thing. I mean, like not in this design, but any other read heavy, cache is typically one of the places where you have limited, you don't have an unlimited storage like databases, right? Where you can keep partitioning, and so
True.
you always need to limit your cache. So I think that's a good part, since you are storing some details there. So how much to cache to come up with based on your 20% assumption for the hot users, or like overall. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, the estimation thing is tricky, right? Because what we are saying is, in spite of spending, I think Alex calculated 8 minutes on back of envelope, we still come up with the realization that we missed the estimation
Yeah.
for the.
So what I meant is, like, maybe you could have said like a ballpark here, but like as part of high level estimation, I mean, like high level diagram, you realize that this is where you have some this, like maybe you can still ask the interviewer, do you want me to come up with estimates for view cache, or like based on these assumptions, I'll this
Okay,
is
interesting point. So yeah, so I mean,
So
just a question here, because if we look at resources like grokking and so on, they do estimation at the start. But would you people recommend that we could do the back of envelope calculation after coming up with a design? Because here clearly in the design, the materialized view cache is a critical aspect. So would that make sense, or that does not make sense?
I mean, you have to actually, it's not just one place. So as soon as you think that, that's my personal opinion though. So as soon as you identify the component, at that time you can actually think about.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, like initially you just need to at least like have some ballpark ideas just to start with. So that ballpark would at least give you some hints on the high level diagram. So, and once you are putting the components on the high level diagram, you know which components to focus more, or like interviewer is also going to point you or direct you in that where he is interested. So
Okay.
And one thing which actually helped me to expedite these back of the envelope calculation. So here in your case, you were trying to actually say like 2 posts per day and 2K, right? So instead of that, if you just actually get the QPS and then use some ratio, say like 1 to 100 or 1 to 10, it will be easy for your read write traffic to identify.
Very nice. Very good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, any other feedback from anyone? Okay, I can give quickly my feedback. Like, yeah, I'll just like echo the same feedback given by Alex. Like on the timing, you still need to improve. I mean, like your approach is good. Like I also liked like the way you are going, and but like you still need to ask little more questions upfront to clarify some aspects. But like I think you did pretty good job on the overall approach, but like the time crunching is what you need to do, because like take an example of Facebook, you only have 45 minutes. The extra 15 minutes some interview don't even care. So only they might go only if they're interested, and like if they have good positive and they want to like evaluate a little more to get you some extra bar or something. But like otherwise you always need to assume 45 minutes is your time, and you need to finish everything, like validating your requirement also to make sure whatever interviewer asked is good, like identify any bottlenecks, like what your system can do and what your system cannot do. So towards the end, so you need to tell that like what your system has plus and like what your system is not capable of. So that's part of like your system trade-offs that you took. So just you need to improve on that timing aspect. Like this is especially for the interviews perspective only, the feedback. And on the design perspective, like I think you don't have good hands-on on like NoSQL, or like I don't know like on what basis you choose NoSQL, but like I felt like you didn't clearly leverage that NoSQL. As I told, like it has this partition key and sort keys, right? Like which you could have leveraged in the view cache or like even the other pieces. GraphDB is okay, but like if you are not comfortable with NoSQL, you can go with SQL only wherever you are comfortable with, or whichever databases you are comfortable with. But like you just need to list your trade-offs, so that like interviewer is aware that you are aware of this problem. So
Okay.
And especially like on the design, like I think like this is not like a very good design that's going to help feeds. So you still need to like figure out a lot of things to come up with a good design here, like so, or maybe some aspects which I think which might help you to picturize correctly is for a materialized view cache. I mean, like first of all, the term is a bit confusing for me at least, because materialized view is something which I know we use in SQL and RDBMS as a view, or like I don't know like if you use that term for NoSQL. So as far as I know, so just you can just simply say that this is a feed cache, something like, if you do, just to be safe. And on that cache, like you're just thinking that like you only store the feed items for the active users. So but like in reality, like even inactive users also, like I mean like that was brought up by Mehul also, but like my thought process here is you could actually store like there are like other aspects of device also, which device you are viewing. If you are viewing on like a computer or like a bigger screen, you tend to view like 10 posts at once, and like for mobile there may be little less. Continue to scroll, so as you scroll you need to pull more feeds. So for every user, like you don't need to store a lot of feeds in this cache. So just assume like the top 10 or 20 cache is what you need to compute, and keep it in let's say hot store, like which is the cache. So and then like the people can still scroll, and there are like more feeds you need to continuously fetch. So you could have some cold storage, like after 20 posts, like the next 80 posts on like in reverse chronological order, you're going to store in some cold storage like SSDs, which are still good in reading. So that way you are not like computing on the fly for any user and giving them bad CX on the app side. They are not like spinning the banner like in the UI for a long time. Like again, people get frustrated with that. So ideally you like compute for all of them like upfront, and like keep in the hot cache for all the active users, the top 20 or whatever the number that you can come up with. So that's another way of looking at that cache, just as a feedback. And yeah, I mean like that's what, like if you increase your time efficiency, I mean like ideally you need to finish this high level by 30 minutes. So you have another 5-10 minutes to deep dive on celebrity issues or some other single point of failures, or like scalability, replication, all that aspect. If interviewer wants you to, or like there are some tricky situations which don't know like which interviewer will have in mind. Just to, some people like to make it comfortable and try to come you into some aspect where you're not comfortable, like how you think about certain things. And last 5 minutes, like kind of evaluating and providing trade-offs, what your system can do and not do. So that is always we should be aware of. And as a senior engineer and like your experience, I think there is another aspect like of monitoring your system to make sure that it is behaving the way you intended for. So that's part of continuous evaluation, right? Like you continuously be monitoring your overall system and try to keep on improving. I mean, like initially you might have thought like this is going to help, but like it's not helping the way you wanted it for. So you need to tune that. So to get to that place, you also need to about monitoring and which components you are going to monitor and how you are going to have some alarms point of thing. So all that, like the more senior you get, I think the more expectations they'll have and the high bar they normally have in the companies like Facebook. So just to let you know.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's it from my side. I don't know. Anyone else like to share? Anyone else like to give your opinions, questions? Karthikeya, you have something to say, you can always say. You don't need to
So
stop me.
okay, yeah, I just have some, so let's say to start with the feedback for Mehul. So I think Mehul, considering that you haven't done this a lot, I think you were a good interviewer. For example, in the beginning, when you saw that I was trying to do quite a lot of things, you said, okay, assume that it is done and focus on the things that you wanted me to do. So I think you are a helpful interviewer. I felt nice interviewing with you. So good job there.
Yeah, I forgot to tell something about Mehul. So yeah, Mehul, I think your interview was good. Like I didn't feel like you were interviewing for first time. So one thing for you is like I know you are trying to give some hints. Like you should probably ask questions, and I mean like I see that some places you are almost hinting the solution also, what you have in your mind. So I mean like just something to, I mean like you just need to question and leave it to the candidate, see what he's going to think about that. If you give your opinion, he might lean towards the same. I mean like.
Well, that's important. I think you're right. I mean, I was trying to. Yeah, you're right. Actually, you can say that. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, one or two places I feel like you are almost hinting the solution itself, like asking the question and also hinting what you had in mind about that.
Yeah.
So
no, that's fair. That's a fair question.
Like just to make sure, like we want to evaluate candidates' thought process, right? Like mainly in here. So you have to give them a situation or like by asking a question and see how he is going to come up with or deal that.
I think it's a right actually. The challenge is that like when you are remote, the whole dynamics actually change because you don't see the person like while sitting in the room.
Yeah,
then you can
ideally,
see. Yeah.
You like to be still on video for real interviews, but like but still like there's still the physical.
No, that's true. That's fair. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very important actually because you should rather ask questions to interview to bring up this thought process, right? Rather than gear towards a solution, rather. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing for you. I think otherwise, yeah.
I think in general, I feel like, I mean, the system level design is very open-ended, and sometimes I feel like there's no right or wrong answer. It's all about how interviewer perception, that the interviewer interviews
like,
perception is.
always open-ended, right? And
It's
it's
very
all
open-ended.
opinionated of what I think is right or wrong. I mean, like,
Exactly.
so mainly, like, I think we want to evaluate like what candidate thinks and whether he has exposure to certain aspects or systems and how they work and kind of issues they face. So
Yeah.
Yep.
as
So I
long as
think
you're aware of, yeah, go ahead.
so sorry. One question, Naga. So I think one point you raised on the NoSQL. So you are right. I actually do not have any experience with NoSQL. Unfortunately, in my professional life, all I have read is based on the, let's say, the studying I have done. So of course that is no substitute for real life experience. So would you say
Yeah,
that
I mean,
unless
like
it's a
I could see that. Like, I mean, like if you are in that scenario, I mean, like I would not go with NoSQL. I would
okay,
just prefer a SQL and say what I'm comfortable with. I'm going to, like, in SQL, you know how the things are working, right? Like you give
correct,
your
correct.
best. Because even Facebook uses MySQL pretty heavily.
Yeah, I
So
know.
yeah, so there is nothing like wrong in saying it's not like NoSQL is like the trendy or something, because there are some
Mm-hmm.
focused databases in NoSQL which will help certain scenarios to easily come up with. Like whereas in SQL, I mean, like they're from 2 decades, at least 2-3 decades, and like you have all, I mean, like all proven solutions even for scaling and everything. And if you are comfortable there, I mean, like you could have started with that. Like, so
Okay,
if
fair enough.
interview would have drilled you more on NoSQL, I mean, like you clearly you cannot explain, right? If you choose. So
Yeah.
whereas if he drills you on SQL, whatever the scenario, since you have experience, you can always explain that.
And I think you're right. Actually, even I was also struggling that. I mean, I'm still struggling because sometimes what happens is like you can also choose NoSQL. Now the NoSQL has been also, the community has been really pretty good. But there are some trade-off between NoSQL and SQL, right? So if you list out like probably 2 or 3 important trade-off why we choose SQL versus NoSQL, and given the problem that we are solving in this particular context at scale, there are some trade-offs. So I think, to me, I feel like it's okay if in this case, interviewee talk about that and there are trade-off and why we are making this decision. I think it should be okay. Like, right, Naga, like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like if I can talk, I mean, like we can talk about NoSQL, but like my point is, like if you just know high level, you know MongoDB is a document oriented, but like you don't know much of the internals, like how MongoDB is different from other document DBs, or like how document DB as such. I mean, like how take an example of where a document DB is most useful for considering the real life scenario. Maybe a link, I mean, like a places where one to many relationships exist. I think document DB, like hierarchical, still makes sense to avoid many of the points, but like it's not good for many to many, or like it's not good for one to one. So for one to one, like always key value is good. So, I mean, like there are some certain use cases where document DB is good, certain use cases where graph DB is good, and certain places like where key value, so which is again like mostly cache, and some other places also key value is still good. And yeah, so some of the databases like DynamoDB can be both like act as document as well as key value, or like columnar. So Cassandra is again columnar. Like, yeah, each of the NoSQL has its own like um, um, different way of implementing behind the scenes. And if you probably read this designing data intensive book, it actually explains some of the internals of how the database storage engines are implemented. So if you know the storage engines behind these databases, you know what you're talking about. I mean, like that's kind of a detailed level, but at least if you have used, then you'll be more comfortable in answering the questions.
Yeah,
True.
Any other things or people like to discuss? Okay. Thank you, Kartikeya. Thank you, Mehul. I'll stop the recording and we can start.